Hello everyone. Happy morning. So this is Soumya from Zoho Books marketing team. I think it's 11 and so let's begin the session. E-Invoicing 101 with Zoho Books English. A quick rundown of housekeeping tasks come first. Platform name Zoho Meeting is used to host this webinar. You might be able to see the chat window, which is given as Q&A, where you can ask questions. So this is going to be a session on how businesses can smoothly transition to e-invoicing and how to stay compliant. So this session is also designed to provide you with a deeper understanding in terms of both domain aspects as well as in-depth product aspects that covers e-invoicing in India, what is an e-invoice, how to generate and manage e-invoices, its impact on businesses, say like how do you push invoices from Zoho Books, how Zoho Books can help with your invoicing needs, and there is this commonly asked questions, and there are like much more coming up in the session, so please stay tuned. So with that note, I would like to welcome Priyadashni and Pushpalata, our product experts from our team, and I also have Merlin, my colleague from our team. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A tab so that our team can quickly respond to you in resolving your queries. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the session to Priyadashni. The session is over to you.
A very good morning to one and all present here. So I'm Priyadashni, product expert of Zoho Books. And in today's session, we will have a walkthrough about e-invoicing. So just let me know if you're able to view my screen. I'll just be sharing my screen right now. So please let me know if you're able to view my screen. Please give a thumbs up. I believe the screen is visible to everyone. So let's start the session. So in today's session, we'll have a walkthrough about e-invoicing based on this agenda. So this session will throw a light on what is an e-invoice, what is the purpose of generating an e-invoice, and how do we handle this in Zoho Books? That is, how do you generate e-invoices from Zoho Books? And then we will discuss upon some of the common errors which you might face during the generation of e-invoice. And lastly, we will have a question and answer session. Now, what is an e-invoice? Why do we have to generate this e-invoice? So we already generate tax invoices for our customers, right? So what is this e-invoice? E-invoice is just a validation which is given by the government to the invoices whatever we generate if we are a registered business. And this e-invoice is applicable to B2B and overseas invoices only, not the invoices which you raise for a customer or an unregistered business. So what happens here? So whatever invoices you are raising for your customers is going to be digitally validated by the government. So they will validate the information which you furnished and they will return it back with a digital signature, an acknowledgement number, an acknowledgement date, and also an IRN number. So why do we generate this invoice and when did this come into picture? So this came into picture on October 1st, 2020, wherein it was first implemented for businesses with a turnover of 500 crores and above. And now, latest, it has been brought down to businesses with a turnover of 10 crore and above. So if your business turnover has exceeded 10 crores in any of the financial years, then e-invoicing has been become mandatory for you. So you will have to push the invoices to IRP portal and get it validated before sending it across to your customers. Now, what are the transactions which can be pushed to this portal? So we can push the invoices, that is your B2B and overseas invoices, the credit notes which are being raised, and also the debit notes. So now, is there a timeline to push these invoices, these transactions to the IRP portal? Previously, there was no such restriction, but recently there has been an update from the IRP portal stating that if your businesses are having a turnover of 100 crore and above, the maximum time limit to push the invoice to IRP would be 7 days from the invoice date. So this is mandated from 1st of May 2023. So what happens here is if you have generated an invoice on say 1st of May, and the maximum time limit with which you can push the invoice to IRP and successfully generate an IRN is only until 7th of May. When you push it on 8th of May, the invoice will not get pushed. There is a time restriction on it, and this is mandated from 1st of May 2023. So what are the details which will be validated by the Government of India? So the basic details, including your document number and your other details of the transaction, and also your supplier information. Supplier information is basically your information. What is your GST number, the address, whatever you have given, the legal name of your business, etc. And the recipient information would be your customer's information. What is their GSTIN? What is their business legal name? The address you have given. And in address, all the address parts will be validated. So that could be your zip code, that could be the phone number, the street address, the state code. Every vital part of the address will be validated. The invoice item details include the items whatever you have added in the invoice. So it could be the HSN code, what is the tax value, whatever you have applied, etc. And finally, the document total. So what is the taxable amount? What is the tax you have applied? The total of the invoice, credit note or a debit note. All of these details will be validated by the IRP portal. So now what is this base? So now we saw what e-invoicing is all about. Now what are the steps to be followed to generate e-invoices from Zoho Books? Let's have a walkthrough of it. The first and foremost step is to register your GST number in the IRP portal. So as we already discussed, there is a turnover restriction for the generation of e-invoice. So if you have exceeded 10 crores in any of your financial years in turnover, in that case, e-invoice is being mandated to you. So first, you should register your GST number in the IRP portal. So now let's have a walkthrough on what are the steps involved in the same. So this is the link of the IRP portal, that is https einvoice1.gst.gov.in. So once it is done, you need to click on registration dropdown, and then you will have to click on portal login. You need to update your GST number in the e-invoice registration form and enter the CAPTCHA. Now, all your GST details will be populated. That is your trader name, your address, the mail ID, and the phone number will get populated. Now, what you have to do is you need to validate this. So just click on send OTP. Once the OTP is validated, it will ask you to create a username and password. So all you have to do is enter the login credentials, generate the login credentials of your IRP portal. So once this step is completed, you have successfully registered your GST number in the IRP portal. So next step is to establish the connection between the IRP portal and Zoho. As we all know, Zoho is the registered GST. So we need to add Zoho as GST in the IRP portal. So for that, before that, if you are already using Zoho Books to generate e-way bills, the same GST credentials can be used for generation of e-invoice also. However, if you have not done it, you need to follow the next steps, which I'm going to mention. So once you have successfully registered your GST number in the IRP portal, the next step is to add Zoho Corporation as a GST. So for that, just log into the IRP portal using the credentials which we generated before and click on API registration from the menu. Now, under user credentials, you will have an option called create API user. So just click on it and select the option called through GST. So once you select through GST, the list of GSTs will be available in the drop-down. So select Zoho Corporation. Now, it will ask you to enter another set of username and password. This is not your login credentials, but these are your GST credentials. So these credentials only you will be using in Zoho Books. So just make a note of these credentials and then click submit. So this is how the page will look like. So once you click on API registration, you need to select through GSP, and in the drop down select Zoho Corporation. Once you do it, you can see it's asking you for another username and password. These are not the login credentials which we use, but another set of credentials for GSP registration. So please make a note of this, and because these are the credentials which we will be updating in Zoho Books. So now once we have done this, let's have a walkthrough of how this is being handled in Zoho Books. So now, where do we go enable this e-invoicing and Zoho Books? The basic setup in the IRP portal is already done. So now let's see how do we do it in Zoho Books. So all you need to do is just go to settings, preferences. You can see e-invoicing here. Just click on it and click on enable e-invoicing. So we know that there was a turnover restriction which was brought down in the overall timeline. So you can just select from which period e-invoice has been mandated to you and click on enable e-invoicing. Once it is done, you'll have to just click on connect now. So once you click on connect now, enter your GSP credentials. And now click on save and validate. So you can see that my e-invoicing is enabled and it is successfully connected to the IRP portal. Now let's create a new invoice. So I have already added my customer details and I'm selecting the item. So once I save the invoice as draft, you can see there is a prompt on the screen requesting us to push it to IRP. So this invoice is yet to be pushed to IRP. So only after you push the invoice to IRP, you will be able to send it across to your customer. So let me just click on push to IRP. So now you can choose to push only your invoice details, or you can push both your invoice and e-way bill details. If you're going to push your e-way bill details also, it will ask you to enter the e-way bill details for this particular invoice, which you can enter and you can push it. So now you can see this invoice has been successfully pushed to IRP portal. How do you know what are the details which are being done for validation? So you can view it in the footer section of your invoice. So there's a QR code, there's an IRN number, there's an acknowledgement number, and there's an acknowledgement date, which is being given here. So these details can be enabled in the footer section of your template. So I'll just give you a walkthrough of it. So you just need to go to settings, templates, edit the template. So in the footer section of it, you will be able to view the e-invoicing details, wherein you can choose to display the QR code, IRN, acknowledgement number, and the acknowledgement date. So which user will be able to push these transactions to IRP? Will all the users have access? So all of your admins will have access to push the invoices to IRP portal. The other users who are having a different role, then they'll have to be given a permission here. So let's go to settings, users and roles. So when we create a new role for any of the user, we'll have to make sure the push and cancel transaction permission is being enabled. So only if the user role has this permission, they will be able to push and cancel the e-invoices. So now we saw how we are able to push the invoices to the IRP portal. Now we have certain cases wherein the invoices are going to be automatically generated in Zoho Books. So in those cases, let's see how the preferences are done. So for example, we have an option to auto-generate the invoice when an estimate is accepted. We can allow to create and save the invoice as draft alone. We can enable it under preferences and estimates. So when you automatically convert an accepted estimate to an invoice, you can choose to create it and just save it as draft, post which you will have to manually push it to the IRP portal, or you can choose to create, push and send the invoice directly to the customer. This is for the accepted estimate. And for recurring invoices also, you can choose to And for recurring invoices also, you can choose to just create the invoice and save it as draft, or you can choose to create, push and send invoices to the customers, or you can also collect the payments. These are pertaining to the automatic invoice generation from estimates and recurring invoices. So now we have an option called approval in Zoho Books, wherein we have sales and purchase approval. So whenever an approval is enabled, the first step would be approving the invoice. So whenever a sales approval is enabled in Zoho Books, the first step you will have to do is approve the invoice. So whenever I'm creating a new invoice, so the first step would be submitting this invoice for approval. Only when the invoice is approved, then you can push it to the IRP portal. The similar case would be for the digital signature enabled organizations also. So whenever a digital signature is enabled, so you can digitally sign your invoices in Zoho Books. So whenever you're digitally signing it also, first you need to digitally sign the invoices and then you can push it to the IRP portal. Now let's assume you have pushed the invoices successfully to the IRP portal, and now you figure out that the tax percentage applied in this invoice is incorrect. So how can you edit it? So the invoices, once it is being pushed successfully, you will not be able to edit the information. So what you'll have to do is you can cancel the e-invoice. So there are two cases here. So within 24 hours of generation, you can cancel the e-invoice directly from Zoho Books. You are able to see an option called cancel e-invoice near the copy IRN. So you can cancel the e-invoice directly from Zoho Books when you're trying to cancel it only within 24 hours of generation. So once you cancel it, the IRN will be removed from the IRP portal also. Suppose if you're trying to cancel the invoice 24 hours after the generation, what will happen is you will not be able to cancel it directly because these details will get pushed to the GST portal. So what you'll have to do is instead of cancel invoice, you will find an option called mark as cancelled here. So you will have to mark the invoice as cancelled in Zoho Books and you will have to manually remove the IRN in the GST portal. Also, instead of pushing the invoices one by one, you can also bulk push the invoices. Just check the check boxes, click on the more drop down, and then you can push it to IRP. So you can bulk push 50 invoices at once to IRP. And also we have various filters which can be used to view the pushed invoices to e-invoicing. So this will display the invoices which are successfully pushed, and yet to be pushed are the invoices which are created but not yet pushed. And failed would be, so sometimes if you're facing any errors during the push, those failed e-invoicing transactions along with the reasons will be listed in this filter. So now we just had a walkthrough of how to generate e-invoices directly from Zoho Books. So these are the statuses which I discussed earlier. So yet to be pushed is the transactions are created which are not yet pushed to the IRP portal. Pushed transactions are the ones which are successfully pushed and the IRN is generated. Push initiated will be the case wherein you're bulk pushing the invoices to the IRP portal. So when you're multi-selecting the invoices and pushing it to IRP, the status would be push initiated. And cancelled is whenever you're cancelling the e-invoice 24 hours within generation directly from Zoho Books, the status would be cancelled. Mark as cancelled is, so after 24 hours of generation of e-invoice, if you're trying to cancel it, it would be marked as cancelled. and you will have to log into the GST portal to manually remove the IRN from the GST portal. And failed would be it is not successfully pushed, but it has failed due to some reasons, and the reason will also be listed. So now we had a walkthrough of what is e-invoicing, how e-invoicing is handled in Zoho Books, and how e-invoices can be successfully generated in Zoho Books. Now let's have a walkthrough of what are the common errors which you might face when you're trying to push the transactions to IRP. So the first error is related to the phone, zip code, state name fields and address. So as I already discussed, all of your recipient and supplier information is going to be validated by the e-invoicing portal. So what happens here is all the vital information has to be updated in the address. So let me tell you where to check this out. So it could be either your address updated under settings and organization profile. So just make sure you have updated your state address, the state, city, the zip code, and also the mobile number. So one small check which you'll have to do here is make sure there are no spaces or any special characters which are included in the zip code or the phone number, because usually we give a additional space or a special character whenever we are entering the mobile number or the zip code. So this might cause an error. So just make sure to enter just the mobile number without any country code. Similarly, make sure to enter the zip code without any spaces, even before or after it. And also make sure to update the state address 1 and the city. And when you're selecting the state also, make sure you're selecting it from the drop down and ensure the state is matches with the GSTIN. This is as far as your organization details are concerned. If branches are enabled, you will be able to locate these address fields under settings and branches. It will be available here. And one other address which you'll have to check is the customer's address, whatever we have updated. So whenever we are creating a customer, we will have an option of adding the address for the customer. So just make sure you have updated all the details. Make sure you have chosen the country, the state address 1, city, state. So here you can always choose the state from the drop down so that the error would be minimized. And also make sure to enter the zip code and the phone number without any special characters or spaces and just the number. Now the second one would be the shipping address error. So shipping address error is basically like you have a billing address and shipping address when you're creating an invoice. So if there could be cases wherein your billing address and shipping address are two different addresses. So here in this case, just make sure to add the shipping address here with the required tax information. Let's assume your billing address is in Karnataka, whereas your shipping address is in Telangana. You might or might not have a GST number registered with the shipping address. So if there is a GST number, please go to the particular customer contact. In the overview, you will be able to find tax information. So just add the tax information there, add the GST number, and the other details will be populated. Hit save. Once you have done this, just come to add additional address field, click on it, and then add the additional address associating the required tax information. If the shipping address do not have a GSTIN, you can just choose to leave this empty and add all the other details like state address 1, city, state, zip code, and phone number. Once you have done this, when you're creating an invoice, once you select the customer, just make sure to select your shipping address and the billing address correctly. And next up, we have the unit quantity code is not passed or the UQC error. So this error is pertaining to the UQC in the items whatever we have associated. So now whenever we are creating any items in Zoho Books, we have this option of associating units to the items. So just when you're creating the item itself, click on the unit dropdown and click on configure units. Just make sure if this unique quantity code is updated for all of your units. Just check it out and click save. And once you save this, you will be able to rectify this particular error. If you have already associated the item in the invoice and then if you're facing the error, just make sure to update the UQC in the item, come back to the invoice, edit it, and just reselect the item again, which will update the UQC. So I'll just reselect the item again. UQC will be updated in the invoice, and then you can push it to the IRP portal. Next up, we have a serial number tracking. So we know there's a serial number tracking option which is available in Zoho Inventory. So when your books organization is integrated with Zoho Inventory, there will be a serial number which will be displayed in invoices. So the maximum number, the range would be 3 to 30. So if it is exceeding 30, then you will face a serial number error. Similarly, there is a project code error which happens in the invoice. So what is this project code error is that whenever you're creating an invoice, we have an option of associating projects to the particular invoice. Once you have created a project, you will be able to view select project here. Just make sure the project character limit is up to 20. So the project name has to be within 20 characters. And the next error would be sales order number error. So sales order number error happens whenever you are updating the sales order number in the order number field of the invoice. So the maximum digits supported is 16. So if it is exceeding 16 digits, what you can do is just remove the order number field and push the invoice to IRP. Once it is successfully pushed, then you can edit and add the order number, your sales order number here, and save it again. A negative adjustment value error. So there is a restriction from the IRP portal that negative values will not be accepted. So if you are going to update any negative value in the adjustment field or in the line item level, then you will face this error. Make sure there are no negative values updated in the invoice. So next up, we have the field quantity error must match with the regular expression, and the expression is given. So this error is pertaining to the decimal digits in the quantity. So there should be a maximum of 3 digits entered in the quantity. So you can just update it in the item preferences. Just go to settings, preferences, items. So just make sure the decimal rate for your item quantity is always 3 or less than 3, so that this error can be avoided. Next up, we have an error. The field unit price must match the regular expression. So this is pertaining to the decimal characters entered in the rate field. So whenever we are creating an invoice, we will be entering the item rate. So just make sure the item rate has a maximum of 3 decimal digits and not higher than 3. And next, the final error would be the error when entering the IRP credentials in Zoho Books. So whenever you're pushing the invoice to IRP, you might face the incorrect credential error. So as we already discussed, you should add the credentials which are used to add Zoho Corporation as your GSP and not the login credentials of the IRP portal. So just make sure to update your GSP credentials and then try pushing it, which will rectify the error. Now we had a walkthrough on what are the common errors which you might have faced while generating e-invoice in Zoho Books. Next, we will discuss on some of the frequently asked questions. So, or during the e-invoice generation. So the first question is push option is not available. So why is this push option not available? So what might have happened is there are 3 cases here. The first case is we already know e-invoice can be generated only for B2B or overseas invoice. So just check if the GST treatment of your customer is any other GST treatment other than these two. In that case, the push option will not be available. The second case would be, so we already discussed the user must have the required permissions. So just check if the user role has the push and cancel permission to push the invoices to the IRP portal. And the third scenario would be, have discussed upon the e-invoice start date. So whenever we had enabled e-invoicing, we can just see the e-invoice start generation date here. So if you are creating any invoice prior to this date, in that case, the push option will not be available because e-invoice is mandated to you only after this e-invoice generation start date. The second question is, the mark as cancel is not showing, but only cancel button is available. So as we discussed earlier, for cancellation of e-invoice, there are two cases. So if your e-invoice is generated and it has not yet crossed 24 hours, cancel e-invoice option will be available. So you can cancel the e-invoice from here, which will be cancelled in the IRP portal as well. And after 24 hours of generation only, mark as cancel icon will be available. So is shipping address mandatory for creating e-invoices? No, shipping address is not mandatory for creation of an e-invoice. Next up, if an e-invoice is cancelled directly in portal, will it be updated in Zoho Books? So if an e-invoice is directly cancelled in the portal, if you have cancelled it within 24 hours, then you will have to wait until 24 hours has lapsed, and then you will have to mark it as cancelled in Zoho Books. Only then your invoice will be marked as void. And can we undo mark as cancelled if you have marked the invoice as cancelled by mistake? We will not be able to undo the cancellation. Once the e-invoice is cancelled, the IRN becomes invalid. You will have to generate another invoice with a different invoice number, and then you will have to again push it to the IRP portal. Next, once e-invoice is cancelled for credit note, invoice, or debit note, can it be changed from void to open or draft? So once the document has been cancelled, the IRN generated for the document becomes invalid because IRN is going to be based on your document number. It is going to be an alphanumeric which will have a document number also there. So once it is generated, again you will not be able to generate the IRN for the same document number. So just make sure to create another document and then push it to IRP. So you have already pushed the invoice to your IRP portal, but what happened is that when you try to take a printout of the e-invoice, your organization or the company name might not be correctly updated. So what would be the case here is the business legal name might not be updated in your GST tax settings of Zoho. I'll just show you how it is done. So just go to settings, taxes, GST settings. So here there is a business legal name which comes into picture. So just make sure your business legal name is updated correctly, which will be displayed in your generated e-invoice. And now can we edit the pushed e-invoice? So we have an option to edit, to enable the same. So when you're enabling the e-invoice itself, we have an option to enable the option to edit the fields. So you can see here the order number, due date, and customer note in invoices and debit notes, and the reference number and customer notes in credit notes can only be edited. So if you choose to enable, these selected fields can be edited once the e-invoice is successfully generated. So now we discussed on how e-invoicing is handled in Zoho Books and what are the common errors and frequently asked questions. So now if you have any further questions, you can please feel free to ask us in the chat window.
So you can use chat window and then start asking your queries.
So as of now, there is no restriction on in how many days the e-invoice can be pushed. But from 1st of May 2023, for businesses with an aggregate turnover of 100 crores or above, the maximum time would be 7 days from the invoice date. So if you have created an invoice on 1st of April, the maximum time frame for the invoice to be pushed would be on till 7th. After that, you will not be able to push it to the IRP portal. So we have a question from Anuradha Raghavan. Do we have to download all the e-invoices from the e-invoice portal and save them for our records, as they are not available only for 2 days on the portal? So your e-invoice will be available 24 hours only in the IRP portal. After that, they will be pushed to the GST portal. It is not mandatory. If needed, you can copy the IRN, download the e-invoice and add it as an attachment. Either way, your acknowledgement, that is your QR code, the IRN, acknowledgement number and acknowledgement date are going to be available in the footer section of your invoice PDF. Next up, we have a question by Payal Arora. Errors in dispatch address of invoice can also lead to e-invoice push errors. So your dispatch address errors might occur when you're pushing both your e-bill and e-invoice. As far as e-invoice alone is concerned, errors might be due to the billing address and shipping address only. Next up, we have a question by Meenakshi Sundaram Velayudham. If the business turnover is less than 10 crore per annum, but we have overseas invoice, is it mandatory to make overseas invoice through e-invoicing? So e-invoicing was applicable only if your business turnover has exceeded 10 crores and not below it. So you need not generate e-invoices even for your overseas invoice. Next up, we have a question by Shruti Kulkarni. So in case of where turnover is exceeding 100 crores, if 7 days has exceeded and invoice is not pushed to IRP, do we need to issue a new invoice? Yes, you will have to issue a new invoice. We have a question from Krishna V. The 30th of April 2023, can we push the e-invoice without any timeline? Yes, as far as the latest announcement, this is mandated. The timeline restriction is mandated only from 1st of May 2023 for businesses with a turnover of 100 crores and above.
And we would also like to help you with your queries in case if you feel your queries need some more clarifications. Please drop your query to support.india@zohobooks.com. I repeat, support.india@zohobooks.com, along with your contact details. So our team will help you with your queries in detail. Thank you so much for being such a lovely audience and being so patient. So hoping to meet you all in another new session soon. Thank you.